Hello and welcome to Rolly Pulse. I am Chirag Thakkar, commissioning editor at Rolly Books. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Rolly Books on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Today's conversation is on the Central Vista redevelopment currently underway in Delhi as India battles a deadly pandemic. The project is reportedly to cost the government of India 20,000 crores and is to include several new buildings such as the Indian Parliament, a new residence for the Prime Minister and the Vice President, and offices for government and allied ministries. Whether the project should at all be the priority of the state when it's dealing with a national health emergency has been questioned by many. Not to forget concerns raised by conservationists, historians, urban planners, and environmentalists. Each pressure group articulating some very legitimate and crucial red flags in what some call the hasty implementation of an ambitious project such as this. Taking a deep dive into the many aspects of this project today are Prem Chandavarkar and Manju Menon in conversation with Alpana Kishore. Prem Chandavarkar is the managing partner at CNT Architects, an award-winning and widely published architectural practice based in Bangalore, India. Besides his design practice at CNT, he writes, lectures, and blogs on architecture, urbanism, environment, art, and culture studies. Manju Menon is Senior Fellow at Delhi-based think tank Center for Policy Research and works on resource politics, social movements, and environmental justice. She has researched and written on the environmental decision-making processes of contentious development projects in regulatory and public arenas for over 2 decades. Alpana Kishore is a writer and urban activist. She has campaigned extensively for better planning and design of urban projects, especially the Delhi Metro, and preservation of the city's landmarks in the face of rampant construction since 2003. She has also covered Kashmir in Pakistan as a journalist, writer, and researcher for over 2 decades. Her focus is on competing narratives of India and Pakistan and the effect of their rival identities on the region. So, welcome to Rolly Pulse, all of you. Alpana, why don't you get us started?
So, good evening and welcome to Rolly Pulse, brought to you by Rolly Books. I'm really excited to get this discussion started, and so let's jump right into it. Both of you are experienced campaigners and with vast, involvement in issues such as this. So, first of all, let me start with Prem, and then I'll bring the same question to you, Manju. Let's look at the argument for construction of Central Vista. One of the key factors in it is the argument for change, and just the concept of change appeals to the middle class because in a way that equates change with some sort of progress and modernization. Now, how does one construct an argument which sort of says, no, look, you have to hang on to the parliament, you have to hang on to Central Vista, you can't do this. So in the face of that argument, what argument do you construct in return? And, what do you say to people who say that, look, change comes anyways, you have to look at change, everything gets modernized, everything has to, has its life and you have to move on. So I'd just like you to sort of think about that. What would your thoughts be on that?
Well, I don't dispute the need for redevelopment at all and the need for change. Needs have changed. I will accept that. Buildings need to be refurbished. I'll accept that. So if you want to remake it, fine. As a project, that's fine. The question is, how should that change occur? And I think there are a couple of things that we should have seen which are not happening. One is it's the epicenter of our democracy. And so therefore it should happen through a democratic process. It should have been debated in Parliament. This project has proceeded without any debate in Parliament, without any oversight by a joint parliamentary committee. There have been no public consultations at all in the true sense of the word. There have been a few presentations by the architect to selected audiences, but this involves governance. So it shouldn't be just the architect who's presenting. It should be the government who's actually leading public consultation. So one is a lack of democratic process. The second is that whatever you might say, it is a heritage precinct. Now, there's one argument saying this is a colonial construction. Why do we need to acknowledge it as history? But we have more than 7 decades of Indian history. The debates of our Constituent Assembly took place there. Parliament has always functioned from there. It has been the seat of governance, the seat of the president, and it has been a beloved public landscape for ever since independence. The boat club lawns evolved into a sort of vibrant political space at one time. Unfortunately, that's also been disallowed. So its character as a public space needed to be reflected, and how, if you're remaking it, how the remaking of the imperial project to reflect a democratic and independent nation should have been a key part of it. That's another aspect which I don't see adequately reflected. And the third is there are certain good practices in heritage conservation. This has been declared a Grade 1 heritage precinct, and there should have been a heritage audit. And heritage is a matter of public memory. It's not a matter of private judgment. So these audits need to pass democratic scrutiny and debate. And there should have been those kind of processes which should have been the foundation on which the project has proceeded. Unfortunately, even if you see...
And you have not found that in that at all? You haven't seen that happening in any part of the project till date?
We have not seen any heritage audits published. We have not seen any detailed analysis being put for public review on why the parliament can't be preserved where it is. And even if you see the notice inviting tender that invited architects to bid, there is a sort of illusion there that buildings have outlived their purpose. And there isn't a call for professionals in heritage conservation to be part of the architectural team. So one doesn't see an emphasis on heritage at all.
Yeah, so that's my point actually. Why is it so important that we keep that parliament? I mean, you explained about our history and our attachment to it and so on. But people could still argue, and here I'm playing devil's advocate, that look, it's lived its life, and there are more people that need to fit in over there, and there just isn't space, there just isn't offices, etc., etc. I come to your point about identity and about our own destiny as an independent state and how we have taken it forward for the last 70 years within that same space. Why is it crucial that we retain the use of that parliament? I mean, after all, it's not going to be blown up. It's not going to be destroyed. It's going to sit where it is. It's just going to be useless. It's going to be sort of non-functional in a way. So why is it important that we keep that function within the parliament?
The principle of heritage conservation, and this is actually documented in the Unified Building Bylaws of Delhi, is that when you have a Grade 1 heritage building, you change as little as possible. Now, if you look at the fact that heritage is public memory, you don't look at just the physical form, because it's not just the physical form. What has happened in the building is as much a part of the history as the physical form of the building. So the first impulse in good practice in heritage conservation is to also preserve the use of the building as much as possible. If an argument is to be made that current needs cannot be met by that building, I would accept that argument if there was data on the table. If there had been the heritage audit, there was a proper study, and some architects after this project has started have done some studies where they say that there can be modification within the existing building to build larger parliamentary halls as per the revised delimitation that we're going to face in a few years. So it's just that
there's no problem retrofitting this building and redoing it, and yet keeping it as a symbol of this very important history that we had for 70 years as an independent nation.
It can, and if I give you another precedent, the Houses of Westminster in the United Kingdom, which predate our parliament by half a century, that building. Actually, it has an older history, but it was remade after the Great Fire of London. But that's also gone through a refurbishment for exactly the same reason. There need to be larger parliamentary halls. Refurbishment is necessary. But they made the utmost effort to preserve it in the existing structure.
Right.
So one would like to see that effort and that analysis done before it is concluded, no, we can't do it in the existing structure. To summarily dismiss it so quickly is disrespectful of heritage.
Yes. I often give the example of the Prime Minister giving a speech at Red Fort. I mean, it has the same symbolism, it has the same the identity of independent India, and it has the same type of pride associated with important national events and our heritage and our history. And so that's why it's important that the Prime Minister stands on the ramparts of the Red Fort and gives his speech. I mean, why doesn't he give it somewhere else? So symbolism is actually very, very important in this case. Manju, I'll come to you to ask you somewhat the same question, but in your area of expertise, which is the environmental laws and the sort of infrastructure that comes up, and why is this project, would you say, particularly difficult from this point of view, or challenging, because it is not adhered to either in spirit or actually to the laws that are in place already, for the environment, for infrastructure, etc.
Yeah. Thanks, Alpana. These are such wonderful questions. And for me, as a person who's worked on infrastructure projects and development projects across the country, which several governments have practically imposed on local communities who've lived in certain spaces and who are attached to certain spaces, I feel that the Central Vista project is such a lesson in how governments show people in a democracy, how governments show people that what their place is, truly is. I mean, there's the rhetoric of democracy and, all of that stuff, which sounds really great, which also our Prime Minister has sort of repeated on several occasions. But then when it comes down to how things are actually done, the Central Vista project is a really good example to take to see how the government views the role of people. So to go back to your early
and what is that?
Yeah.
How does government view people?
Yeah, basically we are a huge problem if we are asking these questions that Prem has just articulated, and these are not even these are not even extreme questions. These are questions that are from our point of view pretty normal in a democracy, that you ask for certain kinds of assessments. Ideally, we expect our governments to have thought through certain decisions before they actually take them. And so we would like to see those documents where these decisions are recorded. So the interesting part about the Central Vista project, because you were asking the earlier question about change and transformation, even the official justifications for this project are not all that lofty if you read them on paper. It's basically about, so there's a point about improving the efficiency of government functioning. All right, that's one of the justifications for this project. Yeah, modernizing parliament facilities, which, as we know, it's been an issue for the last 20-25 years. I think this has come up every now and then in Parliament for discussion. And there was a joint parliamentary committee that was actually set up under the UPA government, which was to look into what steps need to be taken to actually conduct, to actually improve parliamentary, to the facilities in Parliament. Interestingly, under this government, in the first phase of this government, in 2014, the Joint Parliamentary Committee did some work and then handed over a document to the government, which is not available in public. I've looked for it everywhere to look at what the Joint Parliamentary Committee actually said or recommended or suggested. Because as you know, in Parliament, in Parliament, our members of Parliament may not be completely free to speak their mind because they have to follow the instructions of their political parties. But in the committees is where all the important discussions take place in a free and open manner. And these are recorded and these are supposed to be in public domain. And after the Modi government was re-elected, this JPC was not even set up. And so, in fact, we have an interesting case of a Central Vista project which claims to improve and modernize the parliament, but does not take the parliamentarians' views into consideration. So forget about what we people think. I mean, we're like, we don't matter at all. The parliament and parliamentarians have resorted to all the usual methods that common citizens resort to, which is speak to media people, which is come on TV and talk about why these issues are a problem. We had a couple of ex-MPs who came to one of our open public discussions and raised these concerns. But the point is that there are supposed to be parliamentary forums where these points of view are taken on board and discussed very seriously. But unfortunately, in this case, we don't have that at all. So, I mean...
So let me ask you a question here. Let me ask you both a question here. You know, there are the three of us who are discussing this, and we understand the need for conservation, heritage, and just our memories. And there are people who, from every walk of life, who go to India Gate, enjoy its open spaces, their families, their kids, there are people who play cricket there or hang out with friends and go for a stroll and so on. So it's a public space, but why is the public seemingly so numb? I mean, here architects and journalists and the media, everybody's crying themselves hoarse. The government, of course, is not taking any notice, which is that's to be expected. And given the functioning and the track record of this government, that has not been responsive to the public, for these important questions. But the rest of the public, I mean, why is this issue? It's a difficult question to ask because I'm sure it seems obvious to you that there are glaring, processes in this which can't be overlooked. But to the general public, it doesn't seem involved in this particular aspect. And why do you think that's so? And let me ask Prem to go first. Why do you think that's so?
There's actually a long history to this. There's been a rhetoric of development which is symbolized in the grand projects. Starting from Nehru's talking about the factories and temples and dams being the new temples of modernity, or Chandigarh as a city unfettered by the past. But what happened in the initial years after independence, since we had 2 centuries of colonialism preceding us, we had a sort of displaced sense of history. There was a memory of a glorious past, which was unfortunately too distant and anticipated modernity. With globalization and the Indian economy growing, suddenly people seeing prosperity that was elusive till then. And the Indian city, through software, biotechnology, and other processes, getting anchored in global production. There was suddenly a feeling that modernity doesn't need to be awaited anymore. It's arrived. And the global city became a symbol of development. So I think a large section of the public perceives these grand projects and these notions, the so-called spectacle of modernity, instead of realizing that modernity is at heart an ethical project about freedom and democracy. So, for example, an not unobserved, but relatively unremarked phenomenon in all our cities is that the kind of master plans that we produce, which rest on a certain structure of land markets, set up thresholds of affordability where half or more of the population has to exist outside master planning. Now we see this. We see this in the fact that the major housing growth is in slums, it's in unregulated layouts, it's in haphazard development of villages that have got absorbed into the city. And we see this, yet strangely, we do not seem to notice that half the city is rendered invisible by master planning. Because we just look at these few sort of grand projects as symbols of development. So I think a large section of the population perceives this as development, but I think
so
it is.
Is there a miscommunication, or is there some sort of way that people who understand the issues involved, the dangers involved, who are warning about this, who are going on, talking about this, they are not being able to convey the immediacy of this danger. They're not being able to convey what's going to happen in the future. How do you change minds and how do you communicate this? What is this failure of communication? Manju, would you like to have a go at that?
Yeah. I agree with what Prem has said. I mean, there's certainly an issue there with how these grand projects are actually viewed by the public. In fact, most of the time, that's why governments, instead of working on social and economic welfare, end up giving us these grand projects. And at the end of that, we don't really know who it works for. So I mean, that's of course true, but I would definitely want to add that in the last 20-25 years, these issues of dealing with governance issues have become extremely difficult for people to do. People have found it, people are increasingly disempowered to be able to engage with their own governance, with the governance of their city or with the governance of the public health system in the city. I mean, that's what's on everyone's minds right now, isn't it? I mean, we're all so scared about this. And the problem is that, regulatory procedures and legal procedures have become so hyper technical that it even takes me, who has been doing this work for a good number of years now, it even takes me a lot of effort to understand what these documents or these very dense files that the government puts forward when you ask for RTI information or whatever it is.
True, but I'm just asking as an emotional chord, to strike in. I mean, I for people who've grown up in Delhi like myself, for me, of course, it strikes an emotional chord because I went to school going through India Gate. I've gone out to have ice cream late at night and so on. So, I have personal memories of the spot. But so I would assume is a large part of the city. I know when the Delhi Metro came in, it made Central Delhi and Central Vista within easy access for people coming in from Old Delhi, from Jama Masjid, from Jamnapad, from all kinds of places. It became an area of access. So it became increasingly used. It became increasingly, it brought in the public, and people started coming in like they had never had before, and they really started using it like a very democratic space. So why is that emotional chord not coming in? That, oh my God, what are they going to do to this place? That's what I'm really trying to understand here. You do mention the physical problems, but emotionally,
Yeah, in my view, I think those problems are going to come. The point, so let me speak from the experience of, the very famous the government housing projects, right, which happened here over the last 3 years and then got stuck in litigation. These are the NBCC's very mega, housing colony projects. They call them that, but they're not really that. So the redevelopment of projects at Sarojini Nagar and Nauroji Nagar, people really started to understand what was being done, what was planned for that space when there were activities being taken up at the site. Until then, the project had already been through, the project had already been planned and it was being discussed in government circles, and a lot of paperwork had accumulated on these projects. And it was being reported in the papers, but people didn't really get a sense of what these projects were about. And I've seen this in several places, that it's when activities start getting taken up at the site that the emotional attachment that people have for that place really gets displayed. So
when you actually see the physical proof of what it's going to look like, then you get the shock, and then you understand how it's going to change your daily experience of it. Is that
which is why it's so important for the government to actually present their proposals in a way that people can make sense of.
Okay, Prem, I just wanted to ask you, as an architect and as somebody who's thought deeply about architecture and cities and planning in various forums and forms and so on, what do you think needs improvement in Central Vista? I mean, if we were to look at it from the ideal point of view, let's say it goes through a process of public consultation. There are things that need to be improved, like maybe Parliament's seating, computerization, digitization, etc. The trees on Central Vista, whatever. How would you ideally view this project?
I would say that it should publicly symbolize the relationship between a democratic government and the people. Unfortunately, that's not what it does. It is seeking to increase the spectacle of governance. The increased density of government buildings along the main vista is the removal of some 80 acres of land out of public use into government use. So it's going in the wrong direction. Let me give you, the Central Vista is an urban type called the Grand Urban Axis, and which came up in the early 20th century, late 19th century. It has some earlier antecedents, but it got crystallized around then. And the idea, when it's done in capital cities, is to convey this notion of what governance is. It's an urban type that has been used by imperial, fascist, and democratic states, and with different intents. The one case of an urban axis that came up right from its beginnings in a democracy is the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And if you look at what's happening over there, if you look at the terminal elements of the National Mall, it centers on the Capitol building, the space of parliamentary debate, not on the executive. The White House is to one side. Whereas Central Vista does the reverse, because it was an imperial project. It centers on the Viceroy's palace, and Parliament was to one side. At the other
but
end,
you feel it has been transformed in these 70 years, though it started off as an imperial project. So we can actually claim ownership of it now?
It was beginning to get transformed, and in some, like the Boat Club lawns becoming a site of political protest. And actually, to have a site for political protest that is so visible to government is important, I believe, in a democracy.
Okay.
India Gate Lawns has been a vibrant public park for quite some time now. But I was talking about the National Mall. It is lined by public institutions. It's not lined by offices of government. Offices of government are dispersed. So there's a notion of the heart of democracy actually being a public space that belongs to the city. And that's the way what this, and belongs to the city, not just as a visual spectacle, but as a usable space where you can take your body as a
very important.
As an ordinary citizen and do things there where you feel I am in the city. To just create this sort of dominating spectacle is to ask you to be in awe of government. Whereas a democracy.
Yes, but I do believe, I do believe that we have transitioned to that stage. It's no longer what it was when it was built by the British. It has become a very vibrant part of the city where people actually are involved physically and mentally and culturally as well. I mean, with the institutions like IGNCA or National Museum, etc., both of which are slated to be knocked down. These are used institutions. These are much loved institutions. I remember going as a school child to the National Museum, and of course the IGNCA, there are melas and there are exhibitions where anyone is welcome. Everybody's free to walk in. These are free to the public. There is actually an argument in government that the original plan made by Lutyens was to have these very buildings that are currently being built. But those were to be used for, again, like you suggested, Prem, for the public, as in theaters and cultural spaces and museums of great quality and things like that would draw in the public into the space. But that argument has been sort of used by the government to say, well, this always existed. It was just never developed. So the idea of the core of the city being wasted, so to say, that, oh, look at all this open space, it's all being wasted. let's build in a prime minister's house, let's build in buildings all the way through down Central Vista, like it was meant to be, So again, Manju, I'll come to you. Infrastructure, when we are talking about development as such as this, that what do you think how would you react to this government argument that this is what it was meant to be? I mean, this was a space for government. There's going to be a government train that goes around underground and carrying government, officers from one office to the other. So clearly, as Prem said, this is meant for government. It's not meant for public. When you are sort of looking at infrastructure projects and environmental clearances and the other necessary laws that need to come in, how are we damaging these institutions? What is the danger when we are completely ignoring this aspect of it, that we push all resistance aside, we push all public consensus aside or consultation aside, we don't ask for anything, the government just rams through a project one after the other. I mean, it gives the development that Prem talked about, the middle class so craves and desires and definitely should, aspires towards. But what does it bring in its place? What are the dangers of this?
Yeah, I'm not convinced yet that most people of Delhi view the Central Vista project as a grand development project or as something that's even necessary, because I think Delhiites by now are quite familiar, at least a large number of people who are active in public work and who follow the actions of the Delhi Development Authority and all of the municipal authorities who are in charge of land development in Delhi. I think to all of us, it's quite clear that this is a very major land grab. It's not a development project. And there are various ways in which this has already been shown. For example, in terms of what the government has put out as what it needs, how much office space it needs and how many people would be working in this office space, there's already calculations to show that this could be very well done without knocking down any of those buildings, especially the public buildings that already exist on Central Vista. So I feel that and the big part of this land grab is actually in terms of the public space that's going to become unavailable to to people who want to visit India Gate and who want to spend the entire day there. I mean, it's a sight to see what that place looks like on the 1st of January or on any other public holiday, during the good weather months. And that will completely sort of disappear as soon as government establishes itself, in this major way on Central Vista. And I think that's already known to a lot of people in Delhi. Unfortunately for Delhi, we don't have enough avenues where we can take these grievances, because the institutions are all so fragmented. The institutions that are in charge of looking after development, public services, and environmental, aspects of Delhi are all so fragmented between the central government, the state government, and these very technical, regulatory institutions. And often these regulatory institutions have major conflict of interest because they are not only monetizing land, but they are also in charge of regulating land use. So these kinds of institutions are extremely problematic and almost difficult to imagine that we still exist. They still continue to exist in Delhi.
Yeah.
So
I also know. I just wanted to sort of interrupt you here to ask you that. By this consistent ignoring of institutions or consistent bypassing of laws, it's quite open. And like you said, it's sort of the biggest land grab, etc. But it's also damaging. It's deeply damaging these institutions. It's damaging the laws for which they were set up. I mean, the reason for which they were set up and put into place. So how do you resist this? How do you sort of, you take it to the courts have nothing to say really. You take it to DOAC, which is the body that is supposed to protect, the Urban Arts Commission, which is supposed to protect Delhi and Delhi's heritage and, conserve its spots, etc., etc. So in this situation, what I want to really ask you is that once these laws are damaged or once these institutions are ignored, what do we expect in the future? I mean, things like pollution, things like water, air, what kind of impact does it have on that in the future then?
Yeah. I think the environmental impacts of the lack of urban planning, or the very motivated forms of urban planning that go on in Delhi, that's something that all of us are suffering, right? I mean, right now air pollution is not being spoken about that much, but as soon as the crop burning starts and then the winter months set in, and we'll only be talking about that. It's one more year. For people who suffer from asthma and other respiratory problems, it's practically a trap. They have to either escape from these places, or they have to somehow cross their fingers and hope that they're not going to fall terribly sick or whatever. But I feel that in terms of the kinds of transformations that a city like Delhi needs, in terms of social equality, housing needs, public transport needs for most of us who depend on public services. These are the kinds of development projects and public service projects which actually get stuck because of these kinds of institutional problems. I mean, because people who live in a city are not just looking to stop bad projects. We are also looking to promote the good projects, the ones that are really needed for
exactly.
That
so
doesn't happen.
So what you're saying is that the grand project is going to damage the actual development and actual desperately needed projects that bring about social equity and actual progress in the city. Prem, let me come back to you. Sorry, you wanted to say something here?
Yeah, I think we're also sitting on a social time bomb. We are an urbanizing society. By the middle of this century, for the first time in our history, we'll have more people in urban areas than in rural areas.
And that's truly significant. That's a huge marker.
Hugely significant.
The
number of people living in precarious conditions where they are unrecognized by the planning paradigm, that percentage is increasing. It's not decreasing. And we have examples like this where short shrift is given to democratic processes and rule of law. So what happens if you're one of those unrecognized people whose condition is just growing worse? The contestation is going to reach a level where you're going to see increasing levels of violence. And we are already seeing the first signs of it today. We have an increasing number of people in our cities who believe that the only way they can assert their existence because they've been rendered invisible by the system is through violence. We are seeing that. And then
so we're not providing the services that the state must provide. And we are expecting this invisible population to just remain invisible and free floating for our use whenever we need it, pretty much.
It's actually even worse than that. Once you believe that violence is your means, who are the politicians you will support? Actually, Milan Vaishnav has an interesting study which shows that in India now, if you have a criminal record, your chances of getting elected are greater, because you're dealing with an electorate that realizes the rule of law has been rendered superfluous, and therefore
useless.
Who's a criminal is therefore more effective. And if you can build a relationship of patronage with that person, then that person can get what you need done.
I think that's very effectively put, Prem. I completely endorse that is exactly how it seems to pan out. Let me just focus on one last issue here, because I think we are almost running out of time. See, it's not just the Central Vista, it's not just Parliament, it's also the PM's house, it's also the PMO, it's also cultural institutions under the acts. There is an argument, again, I would put it, that for instance, this is something that I researched as well when I was writing a story on the Central Vista, which is that the PM's house, which was just built about maybe, I think, 20 years ago, the External Affairs Ministry, which was built, I think, 5 years ago. I mean, these are massive projects. The PM's house is, you know, from the point of view of security, so well embedded where it is in its location. And it was decided that Racecourse Road is going to be the location where the Prime Minister is going to live. And so therefore, everything has been carefully thought of for that particular location. I mean, is this waste of public money without even a shrug? I mean, nobody seems to be bothered about the fact that the External Affairs Ministry was built at massive cost just 5 years ago. So it's just going to be knocked down by a bulldozer. You know, is there something that you see in this sort of uncaring, you know, indifference to public money that, again, is not brought out in this project, not talked about at all, you know, not put forward? This complete indifference to public money, let it be wasted. I mean, it's sort of almost imperial in a sense.
Yes, it's been called a vanity project, and I think it's for observing things like this that, and also the fact that it's got this ambitious deadline that it must finish within the current term of this government. There's no logic of that deadline, especially with such speed. You can't go by democratic process. So, but clearly there is no attempt to look at the project in logical terms. For example, I find it extremely peculiar that a government which talks so much about the security threat thinks nothing about putting the Prime Minister, the Vice President, and the President in very close proximity, putting all ministries in very close proximity, and a major military strike can wipe out our government and paralyze our functioning. I mean, let alone the effect of a pandemic with them, everyone's in proximity. And the justification for bringing them into proximity in this age of digital communication is totally unclear. And actually collaboration, which is being put forward as a case for putting them in proximity, is a function of attitude. It's not a function of proximity. There are studies that show that as soon as you're more than 400 feet away from a person in one building, the extent of your physical communication drops drastically. And we've all been to government offices where people in adjacent desks are not communicating with each other, because that's the culture. So a lot of these things which one would think were very fundamental to the basis. I mean, here is this government going on and on. We should be patriotic, support the government because they're facing such a security threat, and is designing this project which seems to be the primary security hazard.
Right. Manju, your last word for this, you know, what would you say to this complete sort of lack of interest in wastage of public money, you know, the kind of money that to rebuild, to just expand upon things that are very much in use, but are going to be pulled down?
Yeah. The less said, the better, Alpana. I mean, you know, what the financial accountability of this government has been, right from demonetization onwards, we still left asking all those big questions about what happened after demonetization. But it's so interesting, the timing of this project came when we were already well into an economic slowdown. We needed to pay attention to what was happening to unemployment in the country. We needed to pay attention to all of those big issues. And yet we had, you know, ministers, especially the Minister for Housing and Urban Development, clearly saying that we are going to go ahead with this project. I mean, he was declaring that we are going ahead with this project because this is the Prime Minister's dream.
Yes. Yes.
What questions can we ask after being told that it is the Prime Minister's dream that's being built?
The client of this project is the people of India, not the government.
Yeah.
That should be understood.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for this really insightful session, and it's been wonderful talking to both of you. And I hope for our listeners that you know, some new interesting facets of this controversial issue have been brought forward. Thank you so much to Prem Chandavarkar and to Manju Menon for being here. And thank you for joining us for this discussion. Do follow Rolly Books on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and for all the other for more updates. And hope we'll see you soon again. Thanks.